The sound of Jessica's designer heels clicking against the marble floor echoed through the hallway of Morgan Industries headquarters. I kept my eyes focused on my computer screen, pretending to be absorbed in spreadsheets as she approached my desk, what used to be my office before she demoted me to executive assistant. "Olivia, where are the Q3 projections?" she demanded, not bothering with a greeting. "The board meeting starts in 20 minutes. I reached for a perfectly organized folder on my desk. "Right here. I've also included the updated market analysis you asked for, plus the preliminary numbers from our Asian division." She snatched the folder without a word of thanks, flipping through it with manicured fingers. At 32, Jessica Morgenstern was everything I wasn't: tall, polished, and married to one of the most influential tech investors in Silicon Valley. The fact that she was my stepsister seemed almost irrelevant now. "These better be accurate," she muttered. Unlike last time, I bit back a retort. Last time had been her error, not mine, but there was no point arguing, not anymore. "My name is Olivia Morgan, and until 6 months ago, I was the chief operating officer of Morgan Industries, the technology consulting firm my father had built from nothing. I'd worked my way up from intern to COO over 12 years, learning every aspect of the business while earning my MBA at night, but none of that mattered after Dad's stroke. Jessica had swooped in with her husband James's connections and her mother's influence over our father. Suddenly, the succession plan that had been in place for years disappeared. Instead of me taking over as CEO, the board appointed Jessica, despite her having spent the last decade working in fashion marketing. "Oh, and cancel my lunch with the Riverside team," Jessica added, already turning away. "I have a more important meeting. They've flown in from London specifically to meet with you." I reminded her. "The acquisition dash." I said, "Cancel it." Her voice could have frozen hell itself. "And remember your place, Olivia. You're not COO anymore, you're just the help." As she clicked away down the hall, I allowed myself a small smile. Jessica was so convinced of her own superiority that she never bothered to look closely at what I was actually doing with all those spreadsheets and reports. She had no idea that for the past year, ever since I first noticed her maneuvering for control, I'd been preparing for this exact situation. Later that evening, I sat in my small home office, surrounded by documents that told a very different story than the one Jessica thought she knew. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus Zhang, our former head of Asia-Pacific operations, who'd retired shortly after Jessica took over. "Everything's ready, Tokyo team is on board." I sent back a thumbs-up emoji, then opened my laptop to check the secure email account I'd set up months ago. One by one, confirmation messages rolled in from key personnel across Morgan Industries' global offices, people Jessica had dismissed as irrelevant, middle managers she never bothered to meet. People who had watched me grow up in this company, who remembered how I'd started in the mailroom during summer breaks, people who'd seen me work alongside them, learning their challenges, understanding their value. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. I quickly closed the laptop before calling out, "Come in." It was David Chin, Jessica's husband, James's younger brother, and ironically, one of my closest allies. "Rough day?" he asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. Unlike his brother and sister-in-law, David had earned everything he had through hard work and genuine talent. I shrugged. "The usual. Your sister-in-law continues to excel at alienating our most important clients. She cancelled the Riverside meeting?" "How did you know?" David smiled grimly. "Because she scheduled lunch with Patterson Holdings instead. James arranged it. They're planning to push through some major restructuring." My heart skipped a beat. Patterson Holdings was known for aggressive cost-cutting and outsourcing. If they were involved. How soon? 2 weeks. They're going to announce a strategic partnership that will effectively give Patterson control of Morgan's domestic operations. David leaned forward, his expression serious. "A lot of people are going to lose their jobs, Olivia." I nodded slowly, my mind racing. "Then we need to move faster. Is everything set on your end?" David had been helping me set up Aurora Consulting, officially a small startup focusing on specialized tech consulting, but actually the vehicle for something much bigger. "The infrastructure is ready," he confirmed. "We can go live whenever you give the word." "But are you sure about this? Once we start, we can't go back." I finished. "I know, but Jessica and James have left us no choice. They're going to destroy everything my father built, all in the name of short-term profits." I opened my laptop again, showing him the messages I'd received. "We're not the only ones who see it coming. The question is, are you really willing to go against your own brother?" David's face hardened. James stopped being my brother the moment he decided to use Morgan Industries as his personal piggy bank. "I'm with you all the way." The next morning, I arrived at work early, just like always. Jessica might have demoted me, but she still relied on me to keep things running smoothly, which meant I had access to everything: client contacts, project details, internal communications. I was reviewing the morning reports when my phone buzzed. It was Marcus again. Singapore office is secure, regional directors all confirmed, another piece falling into place. While Jessica had been focused on impressing the board with surface-level changes, I'd spent the past year quietly building relationships with our international teams. They'd watched in dismay as she dismantled the company culture Dad had created, replacing experience with cronies and cost-cutting measures. Now they were ready to jump ship, but not to Patterson Holdings. The next week passed in a blur of careful preparation. During the day, I played the perfect assistant, managing Jessica's schedule and handling the endless details she couldn't be bothered with. At night, I coordinated with David and our growing network of allies. The plan was complex but elegant. Morgan Industries' strength had always been its people, the relationships we'd built, the expertise we'd developed. Jessica saw them as expenses to be cut. I saw them as the foundation of something new. It all came to a head sooner than we expected. Jessica burst into the office one morning, her face flushed with anger. "Where's the Singapore team's proposal for the Chintech merger? I need it for the board meeting this afternoon." I blinked innocently. "I sent it to your email last night. Didn't you receive it?" She grabbed my keyboard, pulling up her email. "There's nothing here. This is exactly why I demoted you. You can't handle basic tasks." "That's strange," I said calmly, opening my own email. "I have the confirmation receipt right here. See? Sent at 9:47 p.m. to your private email address." Jessica's face went pale. She'd been using a private email account to communicate with Patterson Holdings, keeping the negotiations off Morgan's servers. She'd never told me about it, but I'd known for months. "How did you?" "Oh, that reminds me," I continued, still in my helpful assistant voice. "Marcus Zhang asked me to give you a message." "Marcus? He retired months ago." I smiled. "Actually, he didn't. He's been quite busy setting up Aurora Consulting's Asia-Pacific headquarters, along with most of our senior team in Singapore, Tokyo, and Seoul." The blood drained from Jessica's face as understanding dawned. "What have you done?" "Me? I'm just the help, remember? I just handle the paperwork. Like the resignation letters from our entire international management team, which should be hitting the board's inboxes right about." Her phone buzzed, then again, and again. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I already have." I stood up, gathering my things. "Oh, and you might want to take a look at the client list for the Patterson Holdings deal. You'll find it's gotten significantly shorter over the past few weeks." As I walked toward the elevator, I heard her screaming for security, but it was too late. The pieces I'd spent a year putting into place were already moving. Phase 1 was complete. Now came the hard part. The next morning, Morgan Industries headquarters was in chaos. Security guards stood at every entrance, checking IDs against a hastily compiled list of approved employees. Jessica had spent the night trying to contain the damage, but she was fighting a battle that had already been lost. I watched it unfold from Aurora Consulting's new offices, a modern workspace in a building just 3 blocks away. David had secured the lease months ago, and we'd been quietly setting up infrastructure while Jessica was focused on her Patterson Holdings deal. "Latest count?" I asked as Marcus Zhang walked into my office, looking tired but satisfied. 87% of our international staff have confirmed their transitions to Aurora," he reported. "The rest will probably follow once they see we're operational. But that's not the biggest news." He handed me his tablet, showing an email chain. "The Riverside team? After Jessica cancelled their meeting, they reached out to their contacts in our London office. They want to talk to us instead." I smiled, remembering Jessica's dismissal of that unimportant meeting. "Set it up. And make sure David is there. His technical expertise will be crucial." The phone on my desk buzzed. My assistant's voice came through the speaker. "Your father is here." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't seen Dad since his stroke 6 months ago. Jessica and her mother had made sure of that, controlling his visitors and protecting him from stress. "Send him in." He looked older than I remembered, leaning more heavily on his cane, but his eyes were sharp as ever as he took in my new office. "Nice view," he said mildly. "Dad." He held up a hand, stopping me. "Jessica came to see me last night. She had quite a story to tell about betrayal and corporate espionage." I stayed silent, waiting. "She seemed to think you'd stolen the company's international division right out from under her." He settled into the chair across from my desk. "What she failed to mention was how you did it." "Everything was legal," I said carefully. "The employees who left chose to do so voluntarily. The clients who followed were free to take their business wherever they wanted. Oh, I know that. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. What I want to know is how long you've been planning this. I took a deep breath. Since the day I found Jessica's mother altering your succession plans while you were still in the hospital. His expression darkened. Ah, I wondered about that. I saw what was coming, Dad. I knew once they got control, they'd start dismantling everything you built. The Patterson Holdings deal was just the beginning. Patterson Holdings? He sat up straighter. Charles Patterson's Vulture Fund? I nodded, pulling up the details on my laptop. Jessica and James arranged to sell them controlling interest in Morgan's domestic operations. They were planning to gut the company, layoffs, outsourcing, selling off divisions for quick profits. Dad was silent for a long moment, studying the documents. Finally, he looked up at me with something like pride in his eyes. So instead of fighting them directly, you built a lifeboat, preserved the most valuable parts of the company, the people, the relationships, the expertise, just moved it all somewhere new. I learned from the best, I said softly. You always told me the real value of a business isn't in its assets or contracts, it's in its people. He reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. You did good, kid. Now, tell me about this Aurora Consulting. I might know some people who'd be interested in working with a company like that. Over the next few weeks, the full impact of what we'd done became clear. Without its international teams and key technical staff, Morgan Industries couldn't deliver on many of its existing contracts. The Patterson Holdings deal fell apart when they realized how much value had evaporated overnight. Jessica was furious. Of course, she tried everything: lawsuits, smear campaigns, even attempted to freeze Dad out of the company completely. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail. Dad might have stepped down as CEO, but he still controlled a significant portion of voting shares. And he wasn't happy about the Patterson Holdings deal. The board meeting that followed was brutal. Dad walked in supported by his cane and 3 different attorneys. By the time he walked out, Jessica had been removed as CEO, and James's board seat was under review for conflict of interest. I wasn't there. I was too busy in a video conference with our new Tokyo office, working out details for a major contract, but David recorded the whole thing on his phone. You should have seen her face, he told me later, when Dad started listing all the ways she'd violated her fiduciary duties. It was beautiful. But the real satisfaction came 2 months later, when the dust had settled. Aurora Consulting had not only survived its dramatic birth, it was thriving. Our small startup had offices in 6 countries, a client list that included some of the biggest names in tech, and a corporate culture that put people first. Morgan Industries, meanwhile, was struggling to rebuild. The board appointed an interim CEO and began the long process of damage control. They even approached me about returning, offering my old position and more. I declined politely. That chapter of my life was closed. Then came the day Jessica showed up at my office. She looked different. The designer outfit was the same, but something in her bearing had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been humility. You won, she said without preamble. Congratulations. I gestured for her to sit. This wasn't about winning, Jessica. It was about protecting what Dad built, the real heart of it, not just the name and the buildings. By stealing it all away? There was a hint of her old bitterness. By giving people a choice, I corrected. They chose to leave because you and James showed them exactly what you thought of them, that they were just expenses to be cut, obstacles to your grand plans. She was quiet for a moment, looking out at the view of the city. James left. You know, when the Patterson deal fell apart, he moved on to his next target. Apparently, I'm not useful to him anymore. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy. I'm sorry. No, you're not. But there was no heat in her words. You saw who he really was long before I did. Just like you saw what we were going to do to the company. So what will you do now? She turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw something real in her expression. I don't know. Everything I thought I wanted, it all turned out to be hollow. I considered her for a moment. You know, we're expanding our marketing division. Someone with your experience in fashion and luxury brands could be valuable. She stared at me. You're offering me a job? After everything? I'm offering you a chance to earn something on your own merits. No shortcuts, no political games, just honest work with a team that values real contribution. Why would you do that? I thought about Dad, about all the lessons he'd taught me about business and life. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies, it's about showing them a better way. Jessica left without accepting the offer, but I knew she'd be back. She had seen what we were building at Aurora, something based on trust, expertise, and mutual respect. Something worth being part of. A year later, Aurora Consulting had become one of the fastest-growing tech consulting firms in the industry. We maintained our core values even as we expanded, never forgetting the lessons that had led to our creation. Jessica did eventually join us, starting in a junior position and working her way up honestly for the first time in her life. She turned out to have real talent when she stopped looking for shortcuts. Dad divided his time between advisory roles at both companies, helping Morgan Industries rebuild while supporting Aurora's growth. He never said "I told you so" about Jessica and James, but the pride in his eyes when he looked at what we'd built at Aurora said everything. As for me, I kept the nameplate from my old executive assistant desk. It sits in my office at Aurora, a reminder that sometimes the best view of what's really happening comes from the place where everyone underestimates you. Because in the end, Jessica had been right about one thing: I was just the help. I had helped build something new from the ashes of her destruction. I had helped save jobs and preserve relationships that took years to build. I had helped create a company that reflected the values I believed in. And sometimes, that's the best revenge of all.